This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Welcome back today with our guest, Matt John. I hope you were here yesterday. You're going to hear me talk about that a little bit, but today we're going to dive in on the top 2 competitive advantages that he sees. He works with lots of organizations who he's helping to be an elite system, right? Elite organization, but there's systems, processes, there's things that need to happen to help those teams to operate in those ways. And you're going to hear him talk about that today, how some set themselves apart from others and why. Matt, welcome back to the show. Honored to have you on and us to continue the conversation. I want the listeners to know, hey, you need to go back to yesterday's show if you didn't hear it and listen to Matt and where we talked about navigating that storm. That it's going to happen, right? I don't care if it's some part of your life or business, you're going to have to navigate storms, but it's a way you should be thinking about that and being prepared for the storm and how he has trained himself, I think, to love the storm, right? And to look at it as a positive thing and a learning experience. But go back to yesterday's show, listen to that. Today, we're going to dive into something else. Matt has helped us and numerous organizations to develop and really implement the structure of the elite entrepreneur system or EES that it's part of DLP and Don Winter, has created this system, and it's helped us at LifeBridge in a big way. And Matt has helped us to implement that over the last year. And so looking forward to furthering the conversation with Matt. Matt, welcome back.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Whitney. It's always awesome getting to talk to you.
Yeah, you as well. I want to jump in to us talking about you've helped and working with numerous organizations, right? And you see it's interesting. I think you probably learn a lot by seeing different types of leadership, different types of organizations, different team members, that everybody's having to deal with, at DLP, but then also across the elite members that you're helping and are serving as well. I think it's a unique seat that you get to be in to learn as well, right? I mean, you just see all these different things. But I bet across, numerous organizations, you see some that are just handle the storm, let's say, reference to yesterday's show, differently, right? Or maybe they're more prepared for that storm or whatever, but, they probably have some kind of competitive advantage in some way, right? Or they have different team members who have different skill sets or whatnot. But I'd love to dive into that a little bit and maybe, you'd be able to elaborate on why some have an advantage over others or competitive advantage, or maybe it's from team members, or maybe it's from leadership, or maybe it's, whatever you see there, and help us all to raise that bar, right? Or be prepared for those things that are, aren't an advantage for us because of maybe issues that we don't even see yet, right? But where you've seen that in other organizations.
Sure. So, I think the 2 biggest competitive advantages, if I look across all the organizations that I've had the pleasure to work with, and all the leaders that I've had the pleasure to speak with, the most successful organizations have found a way to number one is simplify, and then the second thing would be surrounding themselves, specifically related to the entrepreneur, surrounding themselves with dynamic individuals to be able to assist in the growth strategy of the organization. So and I'll kind of go into both of those. So from a simplification standpoint, I think at the onset of being an entrepreneur, at the onset of starting a business, right? I think that a lot of folks look at it as that, I've got to focus in this area, right? I have to be exceptional at acquisition, right? And then the moment that you have something acquired, okay, well, I'll outsource, the brokerage aspect of things. I'll find somebody who can bring deals to me. I can potentially even outsource the underwriting of it. I can potentially outsource the asset management. I can outsource the property management, construction management if it's a job that has significant ramp up. There's a number of different things, and I'll just be here, right? But as you grow, you recognize how much of the piece of the pie that you are giving away by not doing that in-house, right? And so, okay, well, let me go find somebody that can broker these deals, right? Let me go find a hunter to bring these deals in. Well, I don't need to, syndicate across this third party. I'll bring someone in to market these deals and raise capital internally, right? I'll bring somebody into asset management. I'll do property management in-house. I'll be my own GC as well, right? And all of a sudden, you've got 3, 5, 8 different verticals within the organization, all of which are doing a decent job, but none of which are, what I call world class, or what, DLP, Don consistently references as, being the best in the world at, right? And the concept there is, what aspect of this real estate business that you have built do you believe that you are either on track to be or currently can be considered the best in the world at doing, right? And the idea there is direct focus to start. All of a sudden, I'm bringing in all of these additional resources because doing it in-house is frankly, is cheaper, right? It can be better for the bottom line, but then the focus is in all of these different directions, right? And that same thing happens from a real estate standpoint. Maybe you start with a single family renovation, right? And you renovate it and you sell it, and you go, okay, well, that was great. Let me try that again. And then maybe you're not getting the same return on that. And you go, well, I don't want to sell it. Maybe I'll refinance it. Now I'll rent it, right? And maybe you get 3 or 4 or 5 of those, right? You go, okay, well, you know what? There's a piece of land over there that would be phenomenal for a home. I just need to know how to build, right? So let me learn how to build, and I'll go build it. And now you're building ground up. And so, well, why would I do that with single families? Let me go do that with a 4 unit or a duplex or an 8 unit or a 10 unit. And now you're doing single family BRRRR method. You're doing single family ground up construction, scattered lots. You're doing, permitting, zoning, and titling. You're doing, small multifamilies. You're doing duplexes and quads, and it's all over the map, right? Again, simplify, focus. What do you believe that you can be the best in the world at doing, right? And so it's from which verticals do you believe that you can be the best at doing, and which are you going to develop strategic, concrete relationships with third-party vendors that are able not only to do the job at the service levels that your organization wants to be able to achieve those jobs at, but also be able to do that at a price point that makes a lot of sense for you based on your growth path, your growth pattern, your trajectory. But then also making sure to select the specific type of real estate venture that you're most passionate about, that you believe can really deliver on what your values are, your why is, the purpose and the mission of your business and your organization, and really focusing in and zoning in on that, right? So from a simplification model, really dialing in what will be the laser focus of the organization, I think is a really critical strategy as far as having that competitive edge, not at the onset of building a real estate organization, but once you've experienced a certain level of success. And then the second thing I referenced is, any entrepreneur that I've ever been around, believes in at different levels of certainty, right? That they are the best person for the job. And the problem becomes is when all of those jobs start to mount as a growing organization, they're stretched too thin, right? And it's no different than what we just talked about from a simplification standpoint. When everything is the focus, nothing is the focus. You're not really being the best in the world at something. And so it really, it gets to the point where an organization has experienced a certain level of growth. An organization needs an experienced, tried and true, track record dialed in professional in a certain area. But that's not enough. They have to align with your values as an entrepreneur, which will inevitably bleed into the values of the organization. Those two things are the most critical things in my experience to bringing on exceptional leaders to help fortify the organization and help give you back as the entrepreneur some of your time to do the thing that you're best in the world at, whatever that may be. So it's really about simplification, both from a strategy standpoint as well as a priority management standpoint, by dialing in what the business is going to be the best in the world at and focusing very, very directly on that. As well as bringing in leaders to the organization who have the ability to truly own the different verticals and the different responsibilities across the highest priorities of the organization.
Simplifying, man, it's like the opposite of the we call it the it's left me. Everybody talks about the shiny object syndrome. That's what I'm thinking of. It's like, oh, let's go over here and do this thing. Or no, wait a minute, that looks amazing. Oh, let's go run over there and do that thing. And I see that happening often as well. And I'm guilty of that also. It's like I see somebody else doing something and I think, well, I could do that. Right. But and maybe I could do that thing, but it's probably not the highest and best use of my time. Right. As opposed to focusing right on our main thing. Right. But having a focus and simplifying, I can think of a number of ways internally where we've made things overcomplicated, and then it takes people out of their roles, right? Because we're having to go do this, like numerous people are now having to go focus on this thing that we've made too complicated. And now it's minimizing the effectiveness of the entire organization because we didn't simplify, or it could have been so much more simple, right? And maybe we couldn't see that at the time, but I can look back and see some of those now, in ways that we've done that. One thing you mentioned, I love to quote, when everything is the focus, nothing is the focus, or something like that. It's like, so true, so true. But you talked about bringing on exceptional leaders. And I know that that's kind of a hot button for a lot of the listeners, and it has been for ourselves as well. But finding exceptional leaders, that are able to take on some of those roles. I know as Sam and I grew, and initially Sam and I was doing everything, right? And probably not doing, not probably, but weren't doing everything great, right? But, when you're doing everything, it's kind of back to the first points, right? You're focused on everything. You're not focused on, right, really in maybe your superpower, like we were talking about yesterday. But as we have grown, we've been able to find people who are better at these things than we were, right? And then we can start pulling out of those things and focusing on the area that we are best at, right? And it helps us to improve so much. But it's not easy to find those people, right? Those exceptional leaders like you're talking about, or, like yourself, Matt. It's hard to find people who are willing to go face that storm like we talked about yesterday, right? That's not the norm, right? Or people that want to stick around that have that mindset anyway, because they're willing to go do their own thing too. But how have you seen people find exceptional leaders?
Yeah, so I think there's all the common answers to this, right? And I think everything from how do you have the interviews, right? And not just one and making a decision, right? But is there, the leader interview, and then ultimately the kind of round table of the group interview, and then, senior leadership interview, and there can be a number of different levels of that, right? And then huddling up after the fact and kind of giving, hey, here's some pros and some cons, here's some, concerns. I mean, not pros and cons, right? But, they seem really dynamic in these places that this was an area of concern, and then ultimately coming together and really being, collaborative on the decision. Reference checks, right? Let me talk to people who've worked with this individual in the past and, see if but ultimately the thing that it continues to be tried and true, that I have seen, the resume and the questioning, during the interview process around doing the job, that will be very difficult to fake. I think there should be levels of specificity that people are able to dive into. There should be levels of, very, very direct references for, okay, well, you say you've done this. Give me, what was your biggest achievement, right? Or you said you were responsible for this. Talk to me a little bit about what that daily or weekly responsibility looked like. If you're getting vague responses, you're getting answers that, they sound great. Somebody was talking for a while, but you can't really, you're looking back at it, or you're reviewing it if you're recording the interview, which again, is one of the things you can do. You should be able to identify that stuff pretty easily. That doesn't tend to be the issue, right? That doesn't tend to be the biggest problem that people face as far as bringing in leaders. I think the bigger problem, or at least the one that I see more frequently, is bringing people in and then realizing after the fact that they don't match your organization. They don't share in your values. They're not passionate about your mission, your purpose, the why of you as an entrepreneur and of your organization. And, that's really as simple as step out of that interview process for a few minutes, whether that's at the beginning of the interview or the end of the interview, and really ask these individuals questions around, hey, did you go out to our website and look at our values, right? Talk to me about some of your values, right? What are your core values as an individual, right? Do these match yours as an organization? Or is this person... If you want for people to be happy and jovial and enjoyable to work with, and that's a really critical aspect for you and your organization, do they smile on that interview? Do they seem like enjoyable people to be on in that interview, right? Talk to them about your organization, right? What do you guys do that maybe is a little bit different about places that they've been before or could have worked at before, right? What's the culture going to be like at your organization? Be open, be honest, be transparent about that, because the more that you give that individual at the jump, the more that you give that individual during the interview process, the more they have an opportunity to say, you know what, a lot of that sounded great, but that last piece I know really doesn't fit me. Because there's two ways, right? I think a lot of people are just looking at, okay, well, this person is begging for a job, begging for an opportunity, right? They're interviewing with me, and now it's up to me as the entrepreneur, me as the interviewee, to make the decision. Do I want that individual? This is a two-way street. There's two bold yellow lines in the middle of this road, right? They're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them. And the great part about that is when your values and your mission and the reason, the purpose, the why for your organization is posted out there on that website, it's posted out there as part of that job posting, wherever you advertise for those roles, LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, wherever, people get to see that before they even apply, right? They're aware of the organization. They're aware of the values. They're aware of, hey, listen, if this kind of thing excites you, read on. If not, continue the search, right? So recognize that they should be doing just as much of the interview process on you as an entrepreneur, as an interviewee, and your organization as you are doing for them. So that's kind of the first thing, is a really open, honest transparency, and then not just seeing, can the individual do the job, but can they do it in the framework of my organization's culture, right? The type of people that we have here. Is this going to be a good addition to our family, to our cultural unit? I think both of those things are absolutely critical.
I like really focusing on the specific things that they even mentioned that they've done before, right? And I don't think I've always done that well. And some of the holdup there for me has been, hiring a position where I don't have any expertise, right? I know we need this thing on the job, and we've maybe outsourced this in the past, or whatever it may be, and I have no expertise in this thing, whatever it may be, but I know we need it on the team in a big way. So we start to interview for that role. Well, and almost any of these people are going to know more about that specific role than I do, right? Personally, right? And but I like, you can just simplify that to some degree. I mean, you do have to make sure they're qualified, of course, but maybe you can help with that as well, Matt. But one thing, they've probably already mentioned a number of things that they've done in the past, and I think hammering in on a few of those. Tell me more about that. What did you implement there? What were some challenges that you experienced when doing this thing that you said you did at this other organization, or whatever it may be? I like that, just that thought process a lot, because I can do that no matter how much experience I have or knowledge about this specific field. But anything else around that, or what to dive into, or maybe when you feel like, hey, I don't have any experience in this role, even though I'm hiring for it.
Yeah, I think part of the key qualifier there is, and Whitney, if anyone's claiming that they haven't had that exact same experience, I'd love to meet them, because I'm gonna call shenanigans on that on that individual. But I think everybody's been faced with that issue. Everybody's been faced with that challenge, and I think the best way around that is you use your resources. Like it's not the craziest thing in the world to say, hey, you know what, I've actually got I've got a few college buddies, or I've got a few high school buddies, or hey, I met this individual at that conference, or that individual at that conference. Just say, hey, listen, do you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes to help with this interview? I don't need for this individual to know anything outside of you're an associate, right? But you have experience in this place. I want to make sure that, I'm asking questions that will drive at, does this individual have the experience? Does this individual have the skill set to be able to perform the job at the level that I need it performed at, right? I think leveraging all of the different resources at your disposal. But again, and I can't stress this enough, I have seen absolutely dynamic individuals who have experience that is world class, who flat out do not fit organizational culture. It does not match. It never matches. It will fail time and time again. It is such a critical component that is looked over so frequently, and frankly can make up for, in a lot of cases, small, right? Not large gaps in skill set, but small gaps in skill set. Because if that individual wants to come in and sit down and do exactly a job and exactly define and exactly this, but you're an entrepreneurial organization, right? Yesterday, in the interview you just talked about, Whitney, or you referenced earlier, we talked about the fact that at the onset of a venture, you're going to have multiple responsibilities that you're responsible for. Well, that bleeds down to the team as well, right? And you don't want people saying, well, that's not my job responsibility, or that's not within my role. Those aren't within my responsibilities. No, if there's something that needs to be attacked, something that needs to be done, something that needs to be addressed, you don't want that kind of mentality. You want that kind of attitude, right? So you need to vet that just as much as the experience, just as much as, do they have the chops to do the role? Are they going to be the type of individual that if something needs to get done, they're going to go get it done? Or if something needs to happen, something needs to be addressed, there's an issue that's not falling directly into the bucket of someone's assigned responsibilities, is that the type of individual that's going to go, hey, if nobody else is going to handle that, if that's not on anybody else's radar, I got it. I'll address it. I'll take care of it, right? Because that's not something you're going to find on a resume. You've got to find that out through probing questions about, what are the values that you have as an individual? What are the values that you'll bring to the organization? What are the things that are important to you aside from getting the job done to the level that your resume claims that there's experience there that you can do?
One thing I wanted to ask you before we have to move to a few final questions pretty quickly, but I wanted to ask you your maybe a tip on nurturing then those leaders from within the organization. Maybe just a couple thoughts on that. I know we don't have a ton of time we could do numerous shows probably on this one topic, but once we have somebody that we found that leader, like you were just talking about, they're on board, just like nurturing their growth, right? Encouraging their growth. Maybe a couple tips on being able to do that. I feel like it's something we've had to grow in. Our leadership anyway, at LifeBridge, it's like, okay, now we've built this team of amazing people. How do I, ensure that they're growing, right? And that I'm, that me as their leader, I know where they're weakest, right? Or I'm able to help them individually, right? It can become a lot to keep up with, right? As I'm trying to, help everybody in some way, or having that one-on-one relationship with all of them and keeping the culture piece there and all that. Speak to that nurturing a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think I'll go back to the elite execution system from Don's book, Building a Lead Organization, which we talked about a little bit yesterday. There are a couple of just absolutely critical ways and massively helpful ways within the book, within the framework of the elite execution system that can assist. One of which is huddles, right? And huddles can be daily huddles with teams. Huddles can be what we call alignment huddles. But basically, they're a way for you to connect with team members through a framework. It's a design framework. And again, whether that's in a team setting or an organizational, a one-on-one setting, really build that bond, build that relationship, build that trust and that comfort, and that family atmosphere, that family unit, right, that binds through those huddles. And really, it's a regular cadence, doesn't have to be more than 15 to 30 minutes, and just touch on things outside of business priorities. How is your family doing, right? How are, because, it's graduation time, right? Like, is anybody excited about moving on to next year, right? Anybody already got their reading list dialed in from the kids, right? Are you taking any vacations over the summertime? Where are you going? What are you doing? Really just getting those additional pieces of I hate to call it kind of information, but it's different. It's a different level of relationship when you start talking about things that aren't production and aren't business centric and aren't really just directly dialed into that area of focus. The other thing that we do is that it rocks. So you talk about growth and you talk about pushing leaders and promoting leaders to that next step. You should be engaging those team members with what are they producing, right? And I don't believe we talked about this one. I think it was yesterday. So rocks are 90-day top priorities, right? That are owned by one individual. DLP, we do three professional. We also do 3 personal. Certainly different levels of how many are organizationally specific, right? But when we talk about those professional rocks, you should be having that conversation with those leaders, right? Okay, this one, clearly your responsibility right now fits right into your role. That makes perfect sense. It's absolutely a priority. I agree with that one, right? This one needs to be a little bit more specific. There's a framework that rocks work into, right? It's an acronym called SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. But let's say that third one isn't quite that dialed in. Well, what are you passionate about, right? What's the next level of growth for you, right? Maybe you're working in this lane right now. What's a lane that you would want to take on maybe some additional responsibilities? So what's a role that you would want to grow into, right? If there's not an obvious trajectory for that path for that team member. And let's build a goal for you over the course of the next quarter to develop in that capacity, whether that's a production-based goal, whether that's a project assignment, whether it's an educational goal, right? We're going to go, get certified in this, or, take a 6-credit course at a community college or a local tech school, whatever the case may be. I think both of those are really great opportunities to huddle from developing that relationship further. And then, the rock for, let's set a reach goal for you along the lines of the thing that you're excited about growing into and achieving.
All right, Matt. Unfortunately, we're going to move to a few final questions before we run out of time. So I like asking people or guests often the most important metrics that they track. And I know from your background, you probably have some metrics of some kind you track, but it could be personally, professionally, it could be your bench press number, or how many mornings you get out of bed on time, or, something work related, or, what are some of the most important metrics to you that you track?
Yeah. So I think, when you say metrics, it's interesting. That shifts for me, probably month to month at this point, as far as, what are the most, but they're always tied into my rocks, right? It's always tied into the most important priorities. But I think, more than that, it's about habits for me. So I make sure to get up every morning. I have my alarm set for 3:45 a.m. It's early. I go to bed pretty early as well. But it's 3:45 a.m. I know I'm getting up, I'm brushing my teeth, I'm getting ready, I'm getting in the car, and then I've got about a 40-minute commute to the office. And so I get to the gym close to the office by 5 a.m. And I do that pretty darn rigidly, day after day after day. And for me, it's about setting the tempo. And so I don't know if that's tracking a metric per se, but it's something that I consistently do. And I have multiple things like that in life. It drives consistency.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm also early. I love the early morning routine, and I've stressed that so many times. Any other habits that you would say, man, this has produced the highest value for me?
Yeah, I mean, getting up at 3:45, I guess, was the habit there, but it's that regular fitness routine, and it doesn't. I think a lot of people think that it needs to be this rigid thing. It's far more important to be consistent with it than it is to do 3 hours at the gym every day, or constantly be maxing out on repetitions or weight or whatever. As long as you are being consistent with that, is a phenomenal book called The Compound Effect, right? And the idea is, you can go all out and go from nothing to way up on the scale. But the percentage of time that people fall off that is significant, right? Obviously, if you do nothing at all, don't expect any changes. But it's incremental and consistent that produce the highest results over the longest period of time. And I love that concept. So whatever the habit is, doing the habit with that in mind, I can't recommend highly enough.
And how do you like to give back?
One of the things we spoke about, and I don't recall if this was during one of our sessions or whether it was outside one of the sessions, but for me, giving back, and maybe this goes to the metrics I track as well. Smiles and thank yous from people that I encounter, and people that I deal with and assist and help on a daily basis. I mean, those are the biggest fulfillment devices that this earth has to offer to me. It's become very clear to me over my time here that the Lord has put me here to serve. And there's no better indication to me that I've served to a high standard level than when I get those thank yous, when I get those smiles, that tells me that I'm producing value for other people. That's the thing that fills me up the most. That's the thing that excites me the most.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I thank you. If I hadn't thanked you, I thank you now for your help and
solicited.
Yeah, your commitment to LifeBridge and how much you've helped us over the last year. It's been great to just get to know you and you be able to dive in on so many things and helping us to improve internally, which helps us so many ways. But grateful for your time this morning or today, and the yesterday show today, and just being willing to share with the listeners and myself. Very grateful for your time, and so tell the listeners again how they can get in touch with you if they have questions for you.
You bet. Happy to assist or expand on anything we touched on today. My email address is matt.john, JOHN, just like the first name, at dlpcapital.com. It'd be a pleasure to talk to any of them. But frankly, Whitney, I just want to say thank you. Always a pleasure talking to you. It was an honor for me to come on here, and I hope I provided value not just to you but to your listeners. So thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.